Hello everyone and welcome to Sips and Stories. My name is Elizabeth and in today's video I will be discussing my February wrap-up. February was a great reading month for me. I only read a total of 6 books, but they were 6 really amazing books, and I focused exclusively on science fiction and fantasy this month. So you have definitely heard of all of these books. They're extremely popular and they have been on my TBR for forever, but I got around to them this month and I just had a great time. Each one of them was fantastic. No book was under 4 stars for me. A great reading month. So grab your favorite beverage and join me as I discuss these terrific reads. Okay, the first one, Hello McFly. I cannot believe I haven't read this book until now, and that is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I know. I don't know why I have not read this. I read The Hobbit back in high school. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. However, I think I was in my Jane Austen years at that time, so I never really continued with Lord of the Rings. Also, one of my good friends in high school, she was obsessed with this series and she dragged me to all the movies when they came out. And I did enjoy the movies. I still do. I think they're great depictions of the story. I think Peter Jackson did such a terrific job with those movies. The score, all the actors that were cast just fit the characters perfectly. But I don't know why I didn't go back and read the book, because as they say, the book is always better, and I think in no other instance is that more true than The Lord of the Rings. I just found this book to be so cozy, so charming. The characters were so much more endearing than they are in the movies, and I really think that that wasn't felt in the movies. It's just the coziness of this story. In fact, one of my favorite characters is not in the movie at all, and that's Tom Bombadil, right? Tom Bombadil, he is the best. And I also just loved the hobbits and just learning about their culture. I love how they spontaneously combusted into song every few chapters. So much fun. And just you learn more depth about the hobbit race, the elves. Gandalf feels a little more real to me in the book. He's not as perfect as he appears in the movies. He's a little more real. I really liked him a lot. And the writing is incredible. I don't know, is it just me or does this not feel like fiction? It feels like a history book. It feels like J.R.R. Tolkien was some sort of reporter that went to this other world and just wrote down what he saw and reported back to all of us. I loved it. So I read parts of the book in the evening, just with a cup of coffee and tea. And then I also read parts of the books through an audiobook that I found here on YouTube. And I believe the narrator's name is Phil Dragash. So think dragon, Dragash. And he just did such a terrific job. So even though he is not a professional narrator, I really think his edition of the novels is a lot better than the ones you're going to find on Audible. Just so well done how he did the voices and all the sound effects and the movie music that he included. Really, really well done. And I think that audiobook helped me get into the story more so than I would have if I read it mostly on my own. So I have linked that below if you're curious about it. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but if you're like me and you've never heard of it before, check it out. It's wonderful. So I plan on continuing with the series. Of course, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I think I'm gonna save it for maybe summer. I'll read The Two Towers, and then maybe in the fall, I'll read Return of the King. So I kind of want to stretch it out and savor this series as long as possible. The next book that I read this month, I don't physically have the copy, it's back at the library, but that is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. Another book that's been on my TBR for forever. A lot of my favorite booktubers have recommended this book and I really trusted their opinion. And oh my gosh, they were right. This was such a fun story. I really recommend it for fans of fantasy that like female protagonists. So I'm thinking Tamara Pierce and Juliet Marner. Just really, really good writing. That is the first thing I noticed about this book, is how great Katherine Arden's writing is. It's so lush and descriptive and visceral. It just feels very real to me. I loved her writing. In fact, the first 2/3 of the book, loved. The last third of the book was a little rushed for me. I wasn't really getting it, but I still had a fun time with it. This is kind of like a fairy tale retelling. It's set in Russia, I think during the Ottoman Empire, and it's about a young woman named Vasilisa, and everyone in her family wants her to get married, but she is just a free spirit, and she can communicate with all of these animals in her town and all of these quirky little elves and gnomes, and I think they're called like little deities that live in her village. And one day a very sinister priest comes to town, and he's just trying to suppress all this belief in magic and household gods and deities who are just really cute little cozy characters. And so Vasilisa tries to fight back against this priest and get the town to just kind of wake up and not live in fear. So I absolutely loved it. And as one that is not really into series, this is a 3-part series. I'm very excited about the second book, The Girl in the Tower, I believe, because I know that Vasilisa becomes like a full-on warrior in that book, and she goes back to Moscow. So her brother, I loved Sasha, the brother, and in the beginning of the book, he goes and becomes a monk, and he goes off to Moscow. So I can't wait to see Vasilisa and Sasha team up again, because I really loved his character. Great book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was a dystopian sci-fi novel, and that is The Circle by Dave Eggers. Another one has been on the TBR forever. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this story, for good or for bad. It has also been turned into a movie with Tom Hanks and Emma Watson. Although, let me just say, I do not know how Emma Watson plays this character, because May, she is bad. She's a bad girl. So I don't think I want to watch the movie, because I love Emma Watson and I don't want to see her go that direction. But this is a really fun book about a young millennial girl. She's fresh from college. She's had one job already, but it was a really stupid job. And one of her friends invites her to the Circle and puts in a good word for her. So she gets hired by this big tech company in San Jose called The Circle. For all intents and purposes, Dave Eggers doesn't try to hide that The Circle is basically Google. So she goes to this campus. She is just enamored with this company culture that's just light and fun and youthful. There's all these amazingly smart people there. All these celebrities pop up and great Nobel Prize thinkers. And so she really feels like she's on the pulse of the world of culture, because she works for one of the biggest companies in the entire world. And she just really gets ingrained in this culture, and it ends up taking over her entire life. And it just destroys her relationship with her family, her friends. She has no privacy. At one point in the book, she has to wear a camera, and everyone in the world can see everything that she does 24/7, including when she's with her boyfriends. It's really bizarre. And then there is another section of the book where the founder of the Circle, his goal in life is to make everything transparent. So he wants to install cameras all over the entire world so that everyone can check up on each other all the time. So it really speaks to that idea of social media basically being Big Brother. That Big Brother isn't some idea out there like in 1984. That Big Brother is really all of us. It's me, it's you, it's all of us that are connected to this social media culture. And he just speaks to how dangerous that culture is that collective mindset, that mob rule. And I think we're seeing that in the news now more than ever. At one point in the book, the circlers all want to make it a requirement to register to vote, to be a part of the Circle, because they say, oh, we have more people that are circlers than that people that voted in the last election. So very relevant, as we've seen in this election cycle, of just how these companies are influencing public opinion. If they don't like people, they can cancel those people, they can destroy them, people that have other ideas. And this culture really discourages free thinking and individuality and thinking on your own. So I think it's very similar, the ideas in this book, the individual versus the collective, very similar to Ayn Rand. So I try to kind of steer clear of Ayn Rand because I know how polarizing she can be. But if you are a person that enjoys Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead, I really do think you will enjoy this book. Dave Eggers is also very heavy-handed, just like Ayn Rand was, and he just kind of pounds you in the face with all of these ideas. I think this book could have been a few hundred pages less. I didn't really like the characters. They were one-dimensional. The plot is very predictable. There's some big thing that happens at the end that you basically know is going to happen. So the plot was kind of messed up. The writing wasn't that great. The characters were not that great. What's good about this book is the ideas in this book. I mean, some books are just well written, and some books have ideas that inspire you to think critically. And that's what this book is about. I really, really enjoyed it. And it speaks to what's going on in the world today. I loved this book and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Foundation and Empire by Isaac Asimov. This was a terrific book. It is the second in the Foundation trilogy. I read the first Foundation book last year and I loved it. In fact, it made one of my favorite books of 2020 video. I liked it that much. This is kind of a science fiction classic. I think Isaac Asimov is science fiction royalty. So most of this book was written in the 1950s when Isaac Asimov was in his 20s and 30s. So a lot of it does feel outdated. In fact, a lot of the characters smoke in this book, and it's hilarious because it's supposed to be the future, but they're all just sitting around smoking like they would have in the 1950s. So it's a lot of fun. Basically what the Foundation is about the future, about mankind spread out over multiple planets, multiple solar systems, and it's all controlled by one galactic empire. So think Star Wars, the Empire. And a group of scientists decided to break off and start their own society. And so Foundation is about the first 100, 200 years of the Foundation. And it's just a collection of kind of basically short stories about all of these leaders that rise to power within the Foundation. And it's all about just how history is created by not good people, not bad people, just people that see the world differently and have the guts to do things differently. So think about all the people that are changing the world today. A lot of them are bad people. A lot of them are brilliant people and saints and good people. But that's how history moves forward, by individuals that challenge the status quo. And so that's what you'll see a lot of in this novel. So the writing isn't that great. The characters are one-dimensional, but the ideas are fantastic, because what Isaac Asimov is saying is that if we cannot raise our consciousness, we can't get over this ego, this greed, this trying to control people with natural resources, it doesn't matter, if we're living on other planets, because our basic consciousness will be the same. So I really enjoyed this novel. In fact, one of the characters is out to kind of like take over the entire solar system. And the way that he does it is through controlling people's emotions. So whenever he's about to take over a planet, he will just make everyone really sad and really depressed and very apathetic. And same thing with what's going on in the world now. I just feel like a lot of people don't know what to do. We know there's problems. We just feel kind of like we don't make a difference. There's nothing we can do. And that is such an easy way to control people. So fantastic book, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And Silvia Moreno Garcia is perhaps more popular now for Mexican Gothic, which everyone and their brother is reading that book. However, it's a horror novel, and I am such a chicken when it comes to horror books, so I have no plans to read that book. So I decided to read this one first, Gods of Jade and Shadow, because it is a fantasy novel and it is so much fun. What intrigued me about this book and made it put it on my TBR was that it's supposed to be this like adventure story set in Mexico during the 1920s Prohibition jazz era. And Silvia Moreno Garcia, she really delivers on that promise. This book has tons of atmosphere. It takes place in Central America and Mexico and Tijuana and Baja California in the Southwest, in the American Southwest. And it's just a really fun adventure story full of very kooky characters. Cassiopeia is a young girl. For all intents and purposes, she's like Cinderella. It starts out, she is a maid working for her grandfather. Her grandfather is very cruel and mean to her and her mother. And she just has dreams of escaping and going out into the real world. She's also very bullied by a cousin named Martin, who is about to inherit the grandfather's estate, and he puts Cassiopeia down any chance that he can get. So one day, Cassiopeia opens this trunk in her grandfather's bedroom, and a god comes to life, I guess this Mayan god of the underworld, and he is on this quest to avenge his brother who decapitated him and put him in this chest for like 50 years. And so him and Cassiopeia go on this adventure throughout Mexico, throughout the American Southwest and Baja California and the Yucatan, and they meet all of these crazy characters, these gods and ghosts and spirits, in a quest to avenge his honor and return to the underworld. Meanwhile, they are in the jazz era, so there's a lot of interesting descriptions of Mexico City at this time, of Tijuana during Prohibition, and it's just really full of really fun descriptions. This book is one of those kind of books, like, it's everything that you want it to be. It's neither more nor less than what I was expecting. And I really love Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing. She is a very clever writer, but her books are easy to read. It's easy to just kind of get through this one in a few sittings, and I loved it. It's a fun adventure story / romance, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. Okay, last but not least, as they say, is Feed by M.T. Anderson. And oh my gosh, I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. It was absolutely phenomenal. I finished it up last night, and it was one of those books when you finish, I just sat there for a few minutes thinking about it, digesting it. It really just was a punch in the gut for me. It is a dystopian science fiction YA novel, so stay with me, about this group of teenagers in the distant future where the internet is embedded in their brains at this point. So a lot of people, they are just born with the internet in their brain. So the internet basically controls their nervous system, and there's no way for the person to escape from what they call the feed. And the feed is just like our internet. You can communicate with people telepathically, as if you were IMing them, or through email. You can search things on the internet. You can look up things, anything you want to learn, you can find out in a few seconds. But everyone's just becoming passé, because the most interesting thing about the feed is how far advanced the consumerist culture has gotten, to the point where if someone even thinks about something and goes into a certain location, a certain store, they're bombarded with so many advertisements and commercials that they don't have any other choice except to just buy all the time. So it's a very dystopian, just what is it all about? What does it all mean? Existential book. And at the beginning, for instance, it starts out where these teenagers, Titus and a group of his friends, they go to the moon for spring break. And at this point, we all would think the moon is so cool and so interesting. But Titus and his friends are completely blasé about going to the moon. They just find it ridiculous and trite and stupid, and they're basically over it. And on the moon, he meets a girl, his girlfriend, Violet. And Violet is an interesting person because she's trying to resist the feed. So she's always kind of like throwing out thoughts, and everyone thinks she's nuts because she'll just make a statement about something and no one can really understand her. And then you come to find out that Violet had the feed installed when she was around 5 or 6, so it never fully integrated into her nervous system. And it's absolutely fascinating about Violet and Titus's relationship as they try to resist the feed, so to speak. It's absolutely a beautiful novel. So unlike The Circle, where David Eggers is very heavy-handed and just this book has no heart, no emotion, this book has a lot of heart. And at first it doesn't feel like it does. It feels just very blasé, very matter-of-fact. But that's why it has so much emotion, because it's just devastating what happens to these characters. Because while they are living in this consumerist culture, basically the earth is falling apart. Everyone is getting this mysterious lesions on their skin. The sun is fading. The earth, the oceans are boiling over. The earth is just basically being destroyed. There's no more vegetation. There's no more sun, and no one is paying attention to the world because they're all stuck in the feed. And it's absolutely fascinating. Obviously, this book kind of talks about our consumerist culture. So if you're a person like me who's just getting fed up in this pandemic of just walking around Target aimlessly, spending another $50, $70 on things that you just do not need, you will like this book, because it really speaks to that feeling of you just feel like retail isn't cutting it anymore. Buying things, buying clothes, buying books, buying new cars, that isn't solving the existential crisis that we're all having right now. So I really enjoyed this book. I think it really fits our time perfectly. M.T. Anderson wrote this in 2002, so it's almost 20 years old. But the way that it's relating to the world now, it's fascinating. Especially when it comes to, you know, targeted ads on the internet, and also the feed itself. I think that people are saying that Elon Musk has come up with this company called Neuralink, where he plans on installing computer chips in people's brains. And I've heard him talking about it, and he's brilliant, but it's scary as hell when he starts talking about it, because he's like, oh, in the future, there'll be no need to communicate. We'll just all speak to each other in our minds. Words will be obsolete. And I'm just like, I don't want to live in a world like that, where there's no books, where words will be obsolete. I mean, that might be fine for people like Elon Musk, but it won't be fine for someone like me. I like books, I like ideas. So it's really interesting because it's coming to pass a little bit now. I love this book, and as I said, at first I thought it was a 4-star read, but it really became a 5-star read for me, because at the end of the day, it's just a really tragic love story. I loved it, 5 out of 5 stars. Thank you everyone for joining me for my February wrap up. As you can see, I got very passionate about these books this month. I really think there's something about science fiction in particular that has really just been resonating with me lately, just with everything going on in the world. As I said before in a previous video, these books are starting to feel like instruction manuals. They don't feel like fiction anymore. And that's why I like science fiction and fantasy, because they can point out some like basic truths about our real world through these really interesting stories. And that's why I like to read. But thank you for joining me, everyone. And please stay tuned for Middle Grade March. I am so excited about Middle Grade March. I have many ideas for upcoming videos. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.